The metallic clang echoed across the Apache landing pad. "Hey, lady, the coffee shop's across the street." Captain Harris's voice dripped with mockery as he looked down at the small woman bent over the M230 chain gun. Rachel Moore didn't look up. Her worn cloth continued its steady movement across the gun barrel, precise and methodical. Her faded work clothes, scuffed shoes, and gray canvas backpack made her look completely out of place among the $30 million attack helicopters. "Just clean it. Don't touch what you don't understand," Harris sneered from the cockpit. The desert wind whipped across the landing pad, lifting her sleeve just enough to reveal a faded patch bearing crossed daggers and a coiled viper. Harris froze mid-laugh. Nobody wore that emblem unless they'd survived Operation Black Sand, the most brutal classified mission in Special Operations history. The NATO air base buzzed with activity under the harsh desert sun. Rachel had been there only 3 days, transferred from a logistics workshop back east. They saw her plain appearance, tied back hair, makeup-free face, and decided she didn't belong among the elite pilots and specialized technicians. A wiry technician with a chipped tooth leaned against a supply crate. "They sent us a girl to do the cleaning." His voice carried deliberately. Nearby technicians snickered. Rachel's only response was a slight nod, her hands never faltering as she tested hydraulic pressure. "Just stay away from my M230, all right. Don't need you breaking anything important." The group's chuckles grew louder. Captain Harris climbed down from the cockpit. He was the kind of pilot who wore his ego like body armor, tall, broad-shouldered, with medals that opened doors. To him, Rachel was just another rookie. He moved closer, standing inside her personal space. "This isn't your place, sugar." The rumors started. Rachel finally looked up, her brown eyes meeting his for exactly 2 seconds before returning to her work. She moved to the gun barrel next, her fingers working through a maintenance sequence so smooth it looked choreographed. Pull, twist, slide, check. The young technician with nervous habits froze. He'd spent months learning the Apache specifications, but never seen anyone handle the locking pin adjustment with such casual expertise. A week passed with harassment escalating daily. During a supply run, Rachel hauled heavy crates in 110-degree heat. Technicians watched from the shade, making bets on how long she'd last. "Careful, princess," a lanky technician called out. "Don't break a nail lifting those." His friend laughed, spilling his coffee. Rachel didn't pause, just hoisted another crate with controlled precision. As she turned, her sleeve caught, tearing the fabric. The night viper patch became more visible. The technician's laugh died in his throat. The mess hall that evening hummed with exhaustion and bravado. Rachel sat alone at a corner table, her tray barely touched. A group of pilots had been drinking despite regulations. "Hey, you planning to clean guns or polish your nails over there?" one shouted. The table erupted in laughter. Captain Harris sat among them, watching intently. Another pilot added, "Seriously, who let her in here? She looks like she wandered in from a thrift store." Rachel's fork stopped moving. She stood slowly, pushed her tray aside, and walked out. Her steps remained even, her face blank, giving them nothing. When the sun rose the next morning, there she was back on the landing pad, wiping down the Apache systems like nothing had happened. During a routine inspection, Rachel's clipboard slipped, clattering onto the tarmac. A folded photograph fell from her pocket. A younger Rachel in desert camouflage beside a battered Humvee, her arm around a soldier whose 1,000-yard stare spoke of too many missions. The background showed a forward operating base, the kind that didn't appear on maps. The young technician saw the photo, his eyes widening. He handed it back without a word, hands trembling. "That afternoon, you see that patch? Night Viper. No way she's legitimate." Another scoffed. "Probably bought it at some military surplus store. Stolen valor." Captain Harris couldn't let it go. He cornered her one evening. "You ever serve in Afghanistan?" Rachel looked up for just a second. "I've been to many places," she said, then returned to her work. The breaking point came during a live fire training demonstration. An alarm shrieked from the control panel, a system error in the firing mechanism. Technicians froze. Harris was shouting for someone to fix it. Before anyone could move, Rachel was already climbing onto the Apache. Her hands moved faster than thought. Twist, lock, secure. For seconds, and the alarm stopped. "It won't jam when you fire now," she said matter-of-factly. Harris stared, mouth hanging open. A week later, the senior officer arrived, a grizzled veteran with a chest full of medals. He found Rachel during the afternoon shift. "If you're really somebody," he said loud enough for everyone to hear, "prove it." He ordered her to take a shot with the M107 sniper rifle at double the standard range, 2,000 meters with desert wind gusting to 30 miles per hour. Harris stepped forward. "That's insane, sir. No one hits that." The officer's eyes never left Rachel. "She's Night Viper, isn't she? Let's see it." The tarmac went quiet. Rachel didn't hesitate. "Hand me the M107, she said calmly. The 2,000-meter target was barely visible, a small metal plate against the beige landscape. Wind flags whipped frantically. Rachel took the rifle with practiced ease, checking the weapon with automatic movements. She didn't rush. She tested the wind, adjusted for elevation, checked the scope's parallax. Each movement was deliberate, unhurried. The young technician noticed she didn't use any high-tech wind meters or ballistic calculators. She was doing it all in her head. When she finally settled into position, her body merged with the rifle. She controlled her breathing, letting her heartbeat settle. Between one beat and the next, she squeezed the trigger. The rifle's report cracked across the desert. A second later, the distant clang of bullet meeting metal rang out. Dead center. Perfect hit. The silence was deafening. The senior officer's smirk vanished. Captain Harris stepped forward, arrogance gone. "Welcome back, Night Viper," he said, extending his hand. Rachel shook it, gave the faintest smile, then turned back to the Apache and picked up her cleaning cloth. But the universe wasn't done testing her. The base's emergency siren exploded to life. "Medevac down. Grid reference 38 Romeo Quebec Tango. 12 souls on board. Taking heavy fire." The main display screens showed a Black Hawk helicopter on its side in enemy territory, smoke pouring from its engines. Survivors took cover behind the wreckage while multiple hostiles closed in. "Where are our Apaches?" the base commander demanded. "Two in full maintenance, systems offline. 3 more at forward position, 30 minutes out minimum." Those soldiers had maybe 10 minutes before being overrun. Rachel looked at the screens, then at the Apache she'd been working on. Half its systems were offline, weapons partially loaded, flight systems not fully tested. But it was here, and it could fly. "Nobody touches that Apache," the flight commander boomed. "It's not combat ready. Anyone who tries will face court-martial." Rachel moved with purposeful stride. She climbed into the cockpit, hands already starting the startup sequence. Warning lights flashed. Fuel system irregular. Targeting computer offline. "Stop! That's an order!" Harris shouted. Rachel's fingers flew across the controls. "Court-martial me later," she called back. 90 seconds to bring a half-dead attack helicopter to life. Her hands moved in a blur, flipping switches, rerouting power, manually overriding lockouts. The Apache's engines roared to life. She didn't wait for full power. The moment the rotors hit minimum RPM, she was pulling collective. The Apache lifted off awkwardly, tilting dangerously. Rachel's hands and feet worked constant micro-adjustments. She cleared the base perimeter at 50 feet, the helicopter skids practically scraping the desert floor. The flight should have taken 8 minutes. Rachel made it in 5, pushing the Apache beyond its damaged limitations. Every warning light screamed at her. As she approached, the tactical situation became clear. The downed Black Hawk sat in a natural depression. Enemy fighters had taken positions on surrounding ridges, at least 8 RPG teams with more infantry moving to flank. The first RPG launched before she crossed into the combat zone. She threw the Apache into a violent sideways slide, the airframe groaning. The second RPG passed through the space she'd occupied a heartbeat before. She dropped low, using terrain like a shield, the skid scraping rocks. The M230 chain gun was only partially loaded, maybe 300 rounds instead of 1,200. She had 4 Hellfire missiles that might work if the targeting system cooperated. The closest RPG team was 200 meters out, elevated position. She brought the Apache up in a sudden pop-up maneuver. The chain gun roared, sending a precise burst into the RPG position. 1 threat eliminated, 7 to go. AK-47 rounds peppered the armor. An amber warning light turned red, hydraulic pressure dropping. Rachel forced the Apache into a diving turn that would have been aggressive in a healthy aircraft. In her damaged bird, it was insane. She lined up on 2 more RPG positions. The Hydra rockets streaked out, turning cover into craters. Then the 3rd RPG caught her. Not a direct hit, but close enough. The explosion rocked the Apache into an uncontrolled spin. Every warning light lit up. She was losing altitude fast. Rachel's hands moved with supernatural calm. She found the one combination that arrested the spin. The Apache leveled out 30 feet above the ground. The enemy fighters smelled blood, breaking cover to surround the damaged helicopter. She fired her remaining Hellfires in rapid sequence. The chain gun spoke again, short control bursts. When the weapons ran dry, she still had hostiles advancing on the Blackhawk. No ammunition, hydraulics failing, engine overheating. Rachel had other ideas. She brought the Apache around, building speed. The enemy fighters rushed toward the wounded soldiers. Rachel pushed the cyclic forward and dove, not a combat dive, a kamikaze run. At the last second, she pulled back hard, using the rotor wash like a weapon. The tornado of debris engulfed the advancing fighters, blinding them, sending them tumbling. The Apache skids actually struck 1 fighter. She pulled out with meters to spare. The rescue convoy burst over the ridge. Armored vehicles swarmed the area. The remaining enemy fighters scattered. The 12 wounded soldiers would live. Rachel nursed the dying Apache back toward base. Every meter a battle against physics and mechanical failure. The Apache gave up 500 meters from the runway. The engine seized with a grinding shriek. She aimed for clear ground beside the runway. The helicopter hit hard but level, skidding across the desert in a shower of sparks. When it stopped, the silence was deafening. The entire base had rushed to the crash site. They found Rachel still strapped in, hands bloody from fighting the controls, a cut on her forehead dripping red onto her faded work clothes. But she was conscious, calm. The first person to reach her was the young technician. He was crying. 12 souls saved was all she said. The crowd parted as a figure approached. 2 stars on his shoulders. The base commander himself stopped in front of Rachel. Sergeant First Class Moore. Night Viper, Operation Black Sand, August 2019. 47 confirmed kills, 3 silver stars, Distinguished Service Cross, the only survivor of Firebase Artemis. The revelation rippled through the crowd like a shockwave. Night Viper wasn't just a call sign, it was a legend. The soldier who'd held a position alone for 72 hours after her unit was overrun. Rachel stood there, blood trickling from her forehead, looking smaller than ever. But something had changed in how people looked at her. "Ma'am," the base commander continued, "we need to discuss your current assignment." Rachel wiped blood from her eye. "I'm where I need to be, sir. Just wanted to maintain aircraft, keep them flying, keep people safe." The young technician found his voice. "Why? Why didn't you?" Rachel looked at him. "Because I've seen enough people measure themselves by their worst moments. Didn't want to be another ruler in their hands." Every soldier present rendered a salute. Not the casual regulation kind, but the kind reserved for heroes. 3 days after the rescue, a black SUV arrived. A man stepped out who didn't need a uniform for everyone to know what he was. He walked across the tarmac and found Rachel at the Apache, cleaning a weapon system that was already spotless. Still hiding in plain sight, he said warmly, "This was her husband, Thomas. Someone needs to keep these birds flying. The Pentagon wants to talk to you. They're reconsidering parameters for special operations selection." He paused. "There's another option, training position, teaching the next generation. No fiel d'orque." Rachel considered this. "Maybe. Let me think about it." 3 months later, Rachel taught advanced weapons maintenance to a new generation. Her classes always full, always silent with focused attention. She never raised her voice, never needed to. One evening, Thomas appeared with a manila folder marked with classification stamps. We found something in the Black Sand files. About Firebase Artemis, about why your unit was really there. Inside were satellite images, communication intercepts, and a single name highlighted. Someone she trusted. Someone who'd been feeding information to the enemy. Someone still active, still operational. He's running operations in Syria now, using the same networks. Rachel stared at the name, her face carved from stone. 5 years, she'd carried survivor's guilt. Now she knew it was betrayal. "I'm not that person anymore," she said finally, closing the folder. "No," her husband agreed. "You're better, smarter, and you have resources now that you didn't have then." The next morning, Rachel was back teaching maintenance procedures. But those who knew her best noticed differences. Her lessons included subtle additions, escape routes, threat assessment, survival skills hidden within mechanical instruction. The folder lay locked in her desk drawer. She hadn't opened it again, but didn't need to. The name, the face, the betrayal, they were burned into her memory. Late at night, she'd find herself at the range putting rounds downrange with mechanical precision. 2,000 meters, 2,500, 3,000. Pushing boundaries, preparing for a shot she told herself she'd never take. The young technician noticed these sessions. He never interrupted, just made sure the range lights stayed on and fresh ammunition appeared. When Rachel finally noticed him watching, she showed him how to read wind at impossible distances. "Why teach me this?" he asked one night. Rachel was quiet for a long moment. "Because someday someone will need to take a shot that matters. The knowledge needs to survive. That's how we honor the ones who didn't make it back." One afternoon, as the sun painted the desert gold and crimson, the base received visitors, a congressional delegation coming to honor the hero. They expected pomp and ceremony. What they found was Rachel covered in grease, teaching engine maintenance. When pressed for an interview, she simply said, "I maintained equipment. It worked when needed." That's the job. The reporters didn't know what to do with such simplicity. But the soldiers understood. They had found the real thing, someone who did the job because it needed doing. As the delegation left, one congressman asked, "Is she always like that?" The commander smiled. "Every single day, sir. That's what makes her Night Viper." Then, on an otherwise ordinary Tuesday, Thomas returned with news. The betrayer had been located, planning an operation that would cost lives. The intelligence was solid, but political situation made official action impossible. Rachel listened without comment. When he finished, she was quiet. "Finally, I have a class to teach tomorrow. Henderson is finally getting barrel harmonics. Can't miss that." Thomas nodded, understanding. She wasn't saying no. She was saying not yet. That night at the range, several of her best students were practicing. The young technician approached. "Instructor Moore, whatever you're preparing for, we're ready to help." She looked at them and saw determination, loyalty, understanding. "Keep practicing. All of you. Because the moment you stop learning, that's when the desert wins." The file waited. The betrayer planned. Rachel Moore, Night Viper, cleaner of guns and savior of souls, prepared for one last maintenance action. Not on a machine, but on a wound that had festered for 5 years. As dawn approached, Rachel packed up with methodical precision. Her students did likewise, following her example. They walked back together, a master and her apprentices. The Apache sat on the tarmac, its angular hull catching first light. Rachel ran her hand along its hull, feeling every rivet, every seam. Here, a patch where shrapnel had been removed. There, stress marks from combat landings. Each mark a memory, a mission, a life saved or lost. Thomas met her at the hangar with coffee. They stood together watching the sun rise. The silence between them was comfortable, filled with understanding that came from sharing beds and battlefields. 3 days, she said finally. Henderson needs those 3 days to master the harmonics. Can't leave him half-trained. After that, she didn't finish. They both knew what came after. In 3 days, accommodations would be made through channels that didn't officially exist. A ghost would move through the Syrian desert. A shot would be taken that was impossible. A betrayal would be answered with finality. And then Rachel Moore would return to her Apaches, her students, her quiet life of maintenance and meaning. The sun climbed higher. Engines began warming up. In a few hours, her students would arrive, ready to learn from the woman who'd become a legend despite her best efforts to remain invisible. Night vipers strike from shadow, then hide in plain sight. They balance justice with vengeance, knowing when to strike and when to stop. Rachel had become what she needed to be, a keeper of edges, sharp and ready. Not eager for the cut, but prepared to make it cleanly when the time came. In 3 days, that time would come again. Truth had always been patient. It could be buried under years of classified files and redacted reports, but eventually the wind would shift and what was hidden would be revealed. The betrayer in Syria thought he had buried his truth deep enough, but truth had its own momentum. One bullet would carry that truth across impossible distances, not fired in anger, but with mechanical precision. The ballistics would be perfect, wind calculated, elevation adjusted, even Earth's rotation factored. The bullet would fly true because truth always did. One final maintenance action, because that's how the world really worked. Not in grand gestures or dramatic confrontations, but in small, precise actions taken by people willing to step into the shadows so others could live in the light.